Looting across downtown Chicago over the weekend. More riots in Portland. Trump uses an executive order to try to get Americans COVID relief. Is football canceled? And what to do if you have to outrun a bear? Welcome, everyone, to the Buck Sexton Show. Thank you for being here. Wow, mid-August. I feel like every time I come on the air now, I can't believe how fast the time is going by now as we are entering the absolute madness of the election season. It's going to be very intense. There's going to be a lot of crazy times ahead, so we might as well just prepare, lean into it, shields high. And I can't help but say, as I was trying to avoid over the weekend, spending too much time thinking about the news, things kept popping up. You had the Trump executive order, which we will dive into, the enormous Democrat hypocrisy around that. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to help the American people with an executive order. We were trying to hold you hostage for trillions of dollars. The Democrat actual feeling on that. They won't say it that way, although it might sound a little bit like that. But no, we had more protests over the weekend. We had riots, in fact, and looting. The riots in Portland continue on. We were told, as I've said to you, that this was really supposed to be about the presence of federal law enforcement agents, federal police officers. Just think of that. That's what they are. They're federal cops. They are federal cops. And we were led to believe by the media, the Democrat Party, the reason that there was all of this rioting, people throwing bricks and rocks and showing up with weapons and firing mortars and commercial-grade fireworks and lasers trying to blind people. All that happening in Portland because federal law enforcement was there. Oh, you mean that's not the case? That's not why people are trying to burn down a courthouse? In fact, Mayor Ted Wheeler finally had to come out and say, hey, he's Antifa's errand boy, trying to burn down a police station while there are still police officers inside of it is attempted murder. It's a very serious crime. You can't do that. It's arson. It's attempted murder. This is not protesting anymore. So that happened. And then you also had Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who's setting new records. I mean, she is groundbreaking as the mayor here for how violent and how awful parts of Chicago are becoming. She did have the time on Saturday to lecture people on Twitter. It's called the pandemic, people. This reckless behavior on Montrose Beach is what will cause us to shut down the parks and lakefront. Don't make us take steps backward, because people were out in open air enjoying the beach, but they didn't all have masks on, as if all having masks on would give them perfect protection anyway, which of course it would not. I don't think anyone really believes that. But she gets snarky, and she gets threatening when it comes to people out in August in the sunshine trying to get some air after, we're past 150 days to flatten the curve now? We have all the data we need to see that all this stuff that they told us to do has had almost no effect. You understand that flattening the curve, and this is the part of the story that you will not hear from the media, flattening the curve does not guarantee you that there will be fewer people infected or even fewer people who die from COVID-19. That's actually not how it works. It just extends out. It extends out the pandemic. The number of people infected is extended over a longer period of time. That's all. So all this stuff about wear a mask, save lives, wear a mask. Hospital capacity has not been overrun. Everyone who needs medical care in this country is getting medical care, and they don't even speak to you honestly about this. Now we're gonna head into Labor Day still with lockdowns going on, even though the curve is going down in Texas, the curve is going down in Arizona and Florida. But they misrepresent to you what the very policy was that they told us. We had absolutely no choice. Remember, flatten the curve. Flatten the curve doesn't mean fewer people get infected and die. It means we don't overwhelm our medical system and we have time to take the preparations to get PPE and other things in place for the medical community. It's not, oh, if you flatten the curve, instead of 100,000 infections in this place, you'll have 10,000 infections. That's just not the way that the disease works. No, it's that you'll have 100,000 infections over the course of 6 months instead of 2. That's what is actually happening. They don't talk. And anyone who goes back and looks at the early days of the models, and that's all it was. That's what it was. But they mislead you. Anyway, back to the Chicago mayor, who's clearly horrifically incompetent, but no surprise there. Doesn't like being told that she can't run the city effectively, that she can't keep people in her own city safe. No, she'd rather blame and ban the NRA or outside gun sales from her city, whatever it may be. But while she is lecturing people on social media about their lack of social distancing, there were hundreds and hundreds of looters within 24 hours who were ransacking downtown Chicago, going into fancy high-end stores. And we're told this was because of a rumor that a child had been shot by police. Turns out that someone in Chicago ran from cops, turned around, fired a gun at them, was shot, wasn't killed, in the hospital. He was made it to the hospital. He's supposed to survive. And as a result of that, there was looting. Now, you could say there are rumors about it, but that's where Chicago is now. Chicago, the BLM movement, these radical leftists have created a country where, in our third largest city, when cops return fire against a criminal who's trying to kill them with a gun, and no one disputes any of this, when cops return fire now, there might be looting, there might be riots. There will be sometimes. And then you'll have Democrat journos who live in safe, yuppie parts of Brooklyn and Northern Virginia and some of the Maryland suburbs of D.C. and in Silver Lake, Los Angeles. You know, I know where they live. You'll have them all furiously typing away about how this is not indicative of anything. BLM is about justice. Well, over the weekend, it seemed BLM was about looting stores. Looting stores, taking large arms full of merchandise stolen. Broke into a Tesla dealership. Broke into more stores than I can even cite. And this is a reminder that the BLM movement is a radical left movement that has made everything worse for everyone, particularly people who live in predominantly black communities in large cities. They're less safe now. More people are being shot. There's more criminality on the streets. New York is on a pathway now, for example, where you may have the number of shooting and gun victims this year will match for the same period of the last 2 years. So from January to August of 2020, you'll have more shooting victims in New York than you did the same January to August period for the previous 2 years. So we're going at double now what we were before. But BLM, there were a lot of very enthusiastic and even teary-eyed monologues on MSNBC. There were a lot of mostly, not entirely, white liberals who were able to seize upon this in their Trump hatred. They're so upset about Trump, and now they feel like they have the moral high ground, and now they can attack, now they can destroy, they can steal, they can riot out in the streets, they can do all of these things. It is a left-wing movement, but remember, it's the Democrat Party. These are Biden voters. This is the Democrat base acting out because they've been led to believe by their leadership that all the problems in this country are the result of Donald Trump. Everything that's going wrong right now is because of Trump. It's not because mayors and governors of very blue states are incompetent. It's not because the media went along with this reckless, insane anti-cop narrative once again. We've already done this before. We've seen this happen. The BLM movement initially, after the Mike Brown incident, we saw this play out. There were neighborhoods destroyed. There was arson. There was looting. Cops were murdered, all in the name of BLM. But BLM was so powerful and potent for a moment. The moral blackmail of the movement, right? The ability to hold you hostage, your sense of your own decency, your own ethics, were all in the balance. All in the balance. Unless you obeyed right away. All right? They were blackmailing corporate America. They were doing everything they could to show you that you would lose your job unless you went forward and bent the knee and were a part of it. And it swept everybody up into it. And all of a sudden, there are very few people willing to speak out against this movement. Very few people. And Joe Biden, who's just really a third-tier fraud and has gotten very far in life, but really we all know has accomplished nothing other than just being Joe Biden, the senator from Delaware. I mean, this guy is not impressive, never has been, never will be. But he shared just yesterday, it has been 6 years since Michael Brown's life was taken in Ferguson, reigniting a movement. We must continue the work of tackling systemic racism and reforming police. Let's be very clear, my friends. These are the facts. Michael Brown was killed because he was engaged in felony assault of a police officer, according to Obama's own DOJ investigation. And Democrats' continued pretense that Michael Brown was a martyr is dishonest and disgraceful. Michael Brown was lawfully killed in self-defense by a police officer. He was a criminal who was killed trying to kill a cop. And yet this doesn't matter. These are the facts as known by the Obama administration, by Eric Holder's Justice Department investigation. Multiple black eyewitnesses to the events. And here you have the would-be president of the United States, the Democrat nominee, Joe Biden, out there telling everybody that Mike Brown's life was taken in Ferguson, implying that it was taken in an illegal, unjust, criminal fashion. No, it was not. No, it was a lawful, entirely appropriate, under the law shooting. But as we see in Chicago, even when the cops get shot at now, not even just someone trying to take their gun and kill them with it, someone's actively shooting at police return fire, there can still be looting. There can still be riots. Because this is all about blaming society's ills. You know what this is really about, my friends? Blaming the failures of the Democrat Party and the Democrat anti-family, anti-personal responsibility model. Not just on Trump. That's too ephemeral. That's too temporary. Maybe Trump goes away. Blaming it on the cops. It's the cops' fault. You see, that's what Democrats want everyone who lives in a crime-ridden area, a place that is just full of despair, lack of education, lack of intact families, hopelessness. It's the cops' fault, the Democrats tell you. It's not the Democrat left's obsession with undermining the family, with treating marriage like a joke, with expanding the welfare state and limiting personal responsibility at every opportunity. No, the Democrat Party creates nothing but excuses for the misery that Democrat policies actually make. Can't you see how the cops are so useful now for them? Oh, it's all their fault. The men with nightsticks and guns, they're the reason that you don't feel safe in your neighborhood. Not the fact that there are a whole lot of people with criminal records who are now out on the streets because of bail reform, or that there are people that feel like they are untouchable by those very cops because all it takes is a video from a cell phone that looks bad, don't know the surrounding circumstances, that looks bad, and there could be more riots. So cops say, well, we have to stand back. We can't really do our jobs. I don't want my life to be ruined if I'm a cop. I get it. I understand. This is the America the Democrat Party is trying to bring about. We've been here before. This is not just some theoretical. We lived through a spike in violence and lawlessness as a country, starting right around the early 70s and up until the 1980s, finally ended in the 90s. Decades of criminality, violence, despair, and lawlessness. And it was because Democrats thought, well, the problem are the cops. It's not that people make bad choices. It's not that people are wrong, need to be stopped, and need to be punished, irrespective of historical wrongs or oppression or economic or socioeconomic circumstance. We are all held to account by the law. If we abandon that, we have nothing as a society. And Democrats are smugly, sanctimoniously claiming that we should abandon that because it'll be like the suburbs. Just get rid of the cops. It'll be like the suburbs. That's what we're told. Sure. I can't believe we're losing our home that we didn't even sell. That's what Deborah said when she learned she was the victim of home title theft, which is a crime that can actually cost you your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys find your information online. It's not that difficult. Then they forge your signature stating you sold your home to them. You often won't even find out about this until the eviction notice arrives. Protect yourself today with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock can create a virtual barrier around your home's title. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and use promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. You can also find out if you're already a victim of this crime. The normal identity theft services you're familiar with don't protect you. You need the specialists in this one area, and that's Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com, use promo code BUCK. Again, 30 days of free protection. Plus, you can find out if you're already a victim. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK.
Portland, as you know, we've secured the courthouse, but what has been so interesting to see there is finally, it took 70 nights, but finally you have the liberal Portland Mayor Wheeler saying that if you lock police officers in a building and tend to trap them in there, use an accelerant to commit arson, you are committing attempted murder, not demonstrating. It is completely reckless that it took a full 70 days for the liberal mayor to finally acknowledge that that's an unacceptable status quo and these aren't just peaceful demonstrations, as he tried to show wrong-headedly when he walked among these rioters.
How much more of this are they going to suffer through in these cities? Oh, maybe Nicholas Kristof can come out and tell us that Portland's actually not really that dangerous. It's actually quite beautiful. It's lovely. And just don't go into the riot part of town. It's fine. Yeah, sure, buddy. Here's the problem Democrats have. When everybody was really upset about COVID lockdowns, and they didn't think they were upset about that. They thought they were upset about Trump, but they've been really mentally going through a lot of anguish because we've all been separated from each other, and there's a lot of collective anxiety out there. It seemed like a great moment of mobilization, and you were unleashing the Democrat hordes, in a sense, while all this stuff was happening after George Floyd's killing. And now the Democrats have a different situation. And let's not assume that they're a bunch of strategic geniuses. I think they may have largely miscalculated here. I don't think that they can stop this. Maybe the rioters, the looters, care enough about beating Donald Trump that they'll tone it down a little bit. I don't know. But I know the Democrats can't stop this right now. They can't. It's up to the looters and the rioters to decide that they're going to put the brakes on this for a bit. And really, why should they? Don't they believe what they're doing is legitimate, whether it's putting right historical wrongs or, acting out because of social justice or whatever? I don't know. Whatever their motivations are. Because cops are racist and evil. You hear all these kinds of things. They can't stop these lunatic leftists. And this may really cost them. You're starting to see here that if the lockdowns fray, if schools are reopening, and all that's really left are people looking at the party of sanity, the Republicans, and the party of lunatics, the Democrats, may not work out for Joe Biden. So while the riots in Portland continue, the looting happens in Chicago, the shootings skyrocket in New York, and I can't even keep up with all the other places where I'm sure all kinds of bad things are happening on a crime level. There's also the destruction of the economy, the millions of people out of work, the continued pretend game out there that, oh, if only we listened more to the lockdown libs, we wouldn't have any of these COVID problems. Forget all the they don't even look at the data anymore. It's all just wear a mask, wear a mask. And I was in upstate New York with family over the weekend in New Paltz, which is a college town in New York. Never been there before. Actually has really good food. I will say that. I was impressed with the food in New Paltz. But sure enough, I'm walking down Main Street. It's like 90 degrees outside. And everyone's masked up, even outside, walking by themselves. I'm like, why is everyone wearing a mask outside by themselves? You're social distancing. You're not with anyone. If you walk past somebody and you maintain a basic, even if you don't really maintain it, but if you just walk past somebody, you're not going to give them COVID. But we've forgotten this. And I'm talking about what the rules were. The rules keep changing. As we get deeper and deeper into this and more of a realization of what's going on. And some of you are annoyed that I talk about masks sometimes. I'm like, guys, this is oppression. We're just accepting this. This is crazy. Why do we walk around? I don't know what else to say other than this is not based in reality anymore. When you're looking at what people are doing, driving alone in their car with a mask on, people need to stop. We need to stop. Fauci and the rest of them don't know what the heck. Okay, obviously the mask thing annoys me. I'll drop it for now. But, I'm walking through this little town. I don't know how many people live there, but it's a really one town, Main Street kind of town in New York. But there's a college there, the state university. One of the state university branches is there in New Paltz. And sure enough, they have a Black Lives Matter protest going on. I did not see a single person who was not white at the Black Lives Matter protest. I just think that's interesting because they always talk about diversity. Maybe there was one African-American at the protest. I didn't see everybody necessarily that was at the protest, but there are about 40 or 50 people out there screaming Black Lives Matter at cars that they drove by. It's all like white college kids. I just want to know what they think they're accomplishing by doing this. Oh, racist killer cops was one of the signs they had up because that's really, racist killer cops. That's a really inspiring message for our law enforcement personnel. These people they're morons. They're not smart. If you believe any of this stuff, you're just not that smart. I know we could get into the specifics of it and everything else, but you're not that smart. And to bend the knee to this, if you are smart enough to recognize that it's false, then you're just guilty of cowardice. So you can either be dumb or a coward, but to believe things like cops are racist murderers in this country is to be either stupid or a coward. There's no way around it. But there's still this left-wing media echo chamber out there, which is the overwhelming dominant force in our national conversation. And remember, we don't have sports now. We don't have, live events going on. We don't have live concerts. So the news media is more of a center of many people's universes than it would normally be. And you have absurd jokes out there like Stelter over at CNN who had it was like watching unintentional comedy. And I just saw the clip. I don't actually watch the guy's show, but I watched the clips of his show where he's talking about right-wing radio. Woohoo! Right-wing radio. Yeah, here we are. And this is what he says about it. Play clip 3.
Let's go on a trip together to a totally alternative universe. You never hear what's happening there unless you tune into right-wing talk radio. But you need to know what they are saying because the most popular, most powerful talkers in the country have trained their sights on Joe Biden. What you are about to hear them say is mind-boggling. Look, whether you like Biden or not, this stuff is offensive and otherworldly.
This stuff is offensive and otherworldly. Stelter, we know that you only have the job you do because you look like Jeff Zucker. So Jeff Zucker is clearly like, well, this guy was made for TV. But let's get to what people are saying about Biden. What's otherworldly about Biden? The guy's almost 80 years old, and he gets forgetful and clearly has mental fogginess. That's just observable to any person who is even trying to be a little bit serious about who Joe Biden would be as president. It's observable to all. It was observable to Democrats in the media when they thought that they had a better prospect and they were trying to push Biden aside. So now they just lie about it. Now they just have no problem. And they don't say, oh, I was wrong. They just move past it. Doesn't matter. Move on to something else. And now you have Stelter going even further. This was, I don't know if you could say this is the absolute craziest thing I've heard in a discussion about the media right now going into this election, but it's close. It's pretty insane.
Brian Stelter is like, hey, it's not like there's any whole media organizations that, exist to tear down Trump. There's not a whole, I can't think of a place with 3 letters that only exist to take down Donald Trump. I can't think of one. Not one. No.
Play clip 2.
Aaron, your view of this, when you see entire media companies essentially exist to tear down Joe Biden, is there an equivalent to that on the left, tearing down Trump?
There really isn't. And, what I would say, it's really a diet of this type of information that a lot of these voters are getting. A lot of the voters that I talk to, I can, when I interview them, I do hear them saying a lot of the talking points that sound very familiar from some of these shows, which I try to listen to when I'm out on the campaign trail or when I'm at home, watching TV. You can hear these comments being echoed by voters, and that this is the diet that they're on. AM radio, conservative talk, also social media. I mean, the Trump campaign is running a full-blown campaign on social media that is completely off the radar for a lot of regular media is not covering this.
The question was, when you see it, I mean, that woman just blather, just stupid blather coming from her, of course. When you see an entire media company essentially exist to tear down Joe Biden, is there an equivalent of that on the left, tearing down Trump? Media analyst or whoever that is, a campaign person. No, there is not. CNN exists right now to wage war against Donald Trump on behalf of egomaniac Jeff Zucker. That's why it exists. It does not provide any other service. No one's going to find out what's happening in the news or where the stock market is or anything else. It exists to attack Trump. And they're asking rhetorically a question, does anything exist like this to attack Trump? It doesn't get any funnier than this, folks. I don't know. I don't know that I can even call this gaslighting, because I do think it's possible to be a lib journo and lack so much self-awareness, lack so much connection to reality, that you could say this out loud and think that it's a real point.
Is there a media company that exists?
Every media company other than Fox, talk radio, a handful of websites exists to tear down Donald Trump. Every news media company is all in on the anti-Trump jihad. Every single one of them. There are a handful that aren't, and if libs had their way, those news organizations would cease to exist. Isn't it fascinating that the lib media believes that they're the oppressed, that the First Amendment is under assault? Meanwhile, they have total market dominance in terms of platforms, not in terms of listenership or viewership necessarily, but they have market dominance of platforms, in part because there are some greedy, nasty infighters on our side who try to stop the next generation from getting anywhere because they're greedy and nasty, but largely because they've just maintained for a long time this dominance of, the media dominance creates more because of the incumbency effect, right? When you have only libs making decisions at CBS and ABC and CNN and so on and so forth, you're going to have more of that. It replicates itself. But they really can say out loud,
yeah, there's nothing on our side where it's like we're trying to take down Trump.
I don't even know if Brian Stelter would have a job if it wasn't for that. But there's a part of me that feels like any day now Brian Stelter is going to come on air and be like, hey, guys, I was just kidding with all of their stuff, but CNN finally figured it out. And he puts on a MAGA hat, goes and hops on a Harley, and is like, I'm heading to Texas. It's like Brian Stelter is a false flag for the right, run to make us just laugh all the time at lib media. Because, if that is his plan, he does an excellent job. There are a few common concepts in psychology, without getting into the whole debate over whether Freud is useful or useless. There's some common psychological diagnoses that will come up. One of them is projection. right? When you see something in other people that's really about you, right? Or someone else, you impute, is that the right word? You infer nefarious motives or shortcomings in somebody else that really exist in yourself, but you want to transfer that on someone else. Projection. Okay. I think that's a decent definition. Psychologists are probably listening to this and saying, Buck, come on, go get your PhD first. But yeah, I think that's a close enough one. You're going to see a lot of this with libs over the next, 80 days or so. 80 days, folks. Man, it really can't come soon enough. I want to, if I had my way, we would vote like 2 weeks, just get this thing done with, because, oh my gosh. But we're going to have fun. We're going to be in the fight together. And no matter what, at least we got the Freedom Hut, friends. At least we got the Freedom Hut. So, Jean Guerrero, never heard of her before. She was on MSNBC. She engages in a classic act of lib projection here, claiming that, well, I'll let her say it. Play clip 8.
Stephen Miller always encourages Trump's most aggressive and most violent impulses, which Trump appreciates, because every time he listens to a more moderate advisor, he gets pummeled and ridiculed by his base as weak, which Trump hates. He wants to be seen as a killer, and Stephen Miller shares his instincts for violence, and he has he has his fingers on the pulse of his most violent voting base, who want to see these really hostile policies separating children from their parents, systematically turning away the most vulnerable, most desperate people at the U.S.-Mexico border. So all of these very cruel policies, he needs hatred in order to rally people around these policies. And he's been very effective at getting that hatred through systematic demonization of immigrants, as well as the people who support them in the Democratic Party.
He's not even an articulate member of the left-wing lunatic brigade, really kind of having some trouble spitting it out there. Notice the violence of the Trump base. How can any person who claims to have an IQ higher than a microwave, right? How could any person at this point in time refer to the violence of the Trump base when we have gone through months, actual months of systematic, nationwide violence at the hands of Biden voters and the Biden lib Democrat movement, with nothing similar on the right, nothing at all. There is no movement of Trumpsters running around breaking windows, punching people, hurting people, whatever. The insanity of the mob is a problem of the left. We keep seeing it. The proof is every day. The proof is right in front of your face. But Jean Guerrero is going to babble on about how Trump is in touch with the most violent components of his base, and then starts spewing some nonsense about the most vulnerable people turned away at the border. So now we're back to that. Now we're back to kids in cages, as I was yelled at that one time by the former governor of Michigan. Michigan, your governor, I don't know, former governor. Oh, your current governor, Whitmer, is not really any better, is she? But they will do this. The libs will, in what might be described as unintentional gaslighting, because I think they actually believe it. They'll talk about Trump's violent base and how he's capitalizing on their impulses, when, if you have any connection to reality, you turn around and say, the violent base is the Democrats. Who's doing all the looting in Portland? Democrats. Who's doing all the looting and rioting in Portland? The looting in Chicago? Democrats. Right? Who was looting out in front of my apartment here in New York? Whatever it was, about 6 weeks ago. Democrats. Who's doing all of this all across the country? When a neighborhood gets burned down, when there's a mob in the street, when there are people throwing rocks, Democrats. The Republican Party should just refocus its messaging. We are the party now of, you get to live safely and securely in your community. You get to enjoy law and order, and bad people doing bad things will be punished, or you can vote for the other side. That's it. This should be the separation, the clear choice presented to the American voter going into this election. Only one team here, Team Republican, Team GOP, as imperfect and weak and lame as it can be sometimes, and I am fully aware of all their shortcomings. But they're not completely insane. I mean, the Democrats have lost their minds. They really have. And the Democrats are in a different universe right now. I mean, the way that they're, the best example that I can come up with on this one is just compare the rage that Democrats show for social distancing or mask violations, no matter how minor, but not including the John Lewis funerals or BLM protests, of course, with the tepid, oh, well, that was kind of disappointing response they have to massive looting and mob destruction. They've gone insane. Meanwhile, Cory Booker will come out and say, oh, no, Donald Trump is the one who's nuts. Play 17.
This is a time for us to act boldly. We know this, and that's what presidents do. That's what leadership is. We saw it from FDR. We saw it from President Kennedy. We've even seen it from Republican presidents, and it has done nothing. And now his executive orders that you mentioned, I mean, can you believe that one of his executive orders was to say that people with pre-existing conditions should have a right to health insurance? Well, that's the Affordable Care Act that you've been trying to undermine your entire presidency. It's already the law of the land. That's what's absurd about this moment. I sometimes seriously have to wonder what planet our president is living on, because the reality is the people on the ground right now in America are hurting, and they need a lot more than his searing, burning, callous rhetoric.
What planet is Trump living on? Have you ever heard Cory Booker say a word about the looting, the shootings, the rioting, the violence, the anti-cop hatred? Not a word. Not a word. Who's living in an alternate universe, folks? We all know what the answer is. The Democrats. And they're never going to admit it, and they're not going to accept it. So we got to just make sure they don't get into power.